And in case you're not convinced about the bright outlook for the Times Square area, get a load of this. And by the way, those signs don't just grow there. That's what we call vibrant, really vibrant capitalism. We'll meet the man behind the bright lights of Broadway when Business Unusual returns. Times Square has been called the neon billboard capital of the world, and we are pleased to be joined by the capital's chief capitalist. George Stonbely is the chairman of Spectacolor Media, and if you're not familiar with the company, then I suggest you go down to New York's 42nd Street and just look up. Welcome to Business Unusual.
Thank you, Beverly. Nice to be here.
Is this truly the neon skyline of the world?
It is. In fact, we also like to call it sort of the crown jewel of outdoor advertising in the world because of the many displays that adorn the buildings in Times Square. And, of course, the reason is the tremendous traffic and the number of people that come through Times Square every day.
And how many of these ads down there are yours?
About 50% of the advertisements in Times Square are from the Spectacolor media company.
So what is one that we might recognize?
Oh, you would certainly recognize Mr. Peanut. Mr. Peanut returned to Times Square after about a 30-year absence. He's been in Times Square for about a year, and it's the very famous and popular figure of Mr. Peanut, and we have a can that tips over at about a 50-degree incline and spills out peanuts.
Yes. Now, who designs these? Does the company?
Yes, we have a creative team. We work very closely with the clients, and we collaborate. The collaboration brings a crowd-pleasing spectacular.
Did a client ever come to you with something that you said, this can't be done?
No, we can do just about anything in Times Square.
What's the most unusual thing you've done then?
The most unusual thing was probably the Living Santa for the Siemens Company several years ago. They wanted to make a big splash in Times Square for their new cell phone, and we actually had a throne and 4 Santas that were talking to thousands of people on cell phones from the Crowne Plaza Hotel, so that was a kind of unusual one.
How long in general does an ad stay up?
The spectacular ads are generally about 5 years, although once a client is in Times Square, they usually never want to leave. So we have clients, as an example, Eastman Kodak Company has been there for 15 years, and they've recently renewed their agreement to stay another 10. And we have short-term advertisers that like to use the great power of Times Square, the audience, and the traffic there for 1 month or 3 month advertisements final. And
in general, give me a price range of what it costs to put an ad up.
On a yearly basis, anywhere from $400,000 a year, and there are 1 or 2 clients that are spending in excess of $3.5 million a year, and those are for huge displays that are very prominent, low to the ground, and they're very popular.
More than $3 million a year.
Yes.
They must want to see some return on that. How is the accountability for that ad in particular?
Well,
I would think if they spend that much there, they do a lot of other marketing and advertising as well.
Well, I'll get to that in a moment, but as far as understanding the efficacy of Times Square, the amount of people that come through Times Square every day, it's about 1.5 million. We know who they are. They're people that are in the media business and the finance business. They're tourists, they're business travelers that are staying at all the fine hotels in Times Square. In fact, more than 20% of the hotel rooms in New York City are located right in Times Square. So we know that we're getting the business travelers. We know we're getting the business people. We have a resident audience in Times Square of almost 250,000 people who work at the Morgan Stanleys and the Bertelsmanns and the Viacoms and many of the other fine companies that are there. So we know who they are. And of course, the mere fact that there are at least 5 major media events every week in Times Square, your ads are being photographed, they're being included in movies and television commercials and magazine ads, etc. So it works out very well for the clients.
Where else do you do ads?
Right now we're in Times Square, we're in London, and we're in Paris, but we recently announced a new joint venture company with Eller Media, the world's largest outdoor advertising company, and we will be taking our show on the road with Eller in some of the markets that they're very strong in.
And is neon, will there always be neon? I mean, what's the trend? It kind of comes and goes in advertising.
Neon, I think, will always be around. There are a number of different technologies that are trying to replace it, but you can never quite get the brilliancy of color, the blues and the greens and the reds that you can get from neon. But of course, video signs have become very, very popular and are wonderful because they can convey a lot of information and different products for different companies by use of a video sign. Fiber optics are becoming very, very popular. Mm-hmm. We're working on some very new technologies for the new millennium, and they include robotics, and we're very anxious to work them out for some clients.
All right, George Stonbely, thanks very much for joining us, Spectacolor Media. And lest anyone forget, this company was founded by a humble little outdoor advertising concern that was owned by Ted Turner's father. So there you go.